They think you're weak because your eyes betray you. They think they've won the moment that first tear breaks the surface. They lean back, arms crossed, a smirk crawling across their face, like they've just conquered something. And maybe they have. Maybe in that moment, they own the room. But here's what they don't see. Here's what they'll never understand. That tear isn't surrender. It's overflow. It's the dam breaking because there's too much behind it. Too much truth, too much rage, too much clarity packed into a body that wasn't built to contain the nuclear reaction happening inside your chest. You're not crying because you're fragile. You're crying because you're a goddamn pressure cooker. And they just turned up the heat without knowing what they're dealing with. Let's get something straight right now. The world has taught you to be ashamed of those tears. Society has handed you a script that says emotion equals weakness, that vulnerability is a crack in your armor, that the moment you show anything other than stone, cold composure, you've lost. They want you to believe that crying during an argument is the white flag of human interaction. But that's the lie. That's the poison they've been feeding you since childhood. Because if you're ashamed of your tears, you'll suppress the very thing that makes you dangerous. Your emotional depth, your ability to feel everything at a frequency most people can't even detect. You're not broken. You're tuned differently, and that terrifies them. Let's talk about what's really happening when you break down in an argument. Physiologically, your body is in full crisis mode. Your amygdala, that ancient reptilian part of your brain responsible for survival, is screaming. It's flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline because it perceives this argument as a threat, not a physical one, something worse, a threat to your identity, your relationships, your sense of being understood. Your nervous system doesn't differentiate between a lion chasing you through the savannah and someone you love twisting your words into weapons. It's all the same alarm, fight or flight. But here's where you're different from the people who can argue with cold, calculated precision. Your fight or flight response has a third option: freeze, flood, emotional overwhelm. Your tears are the release valve because your body literally cannot process the intensity of what's happening through words alone. You're not weak, you're overclocked. You're running at a processing speed that would melt most people's circuits. And here's the cruel irony. The people who stay calm during arguments, the ones who never shed a tear, who debate like they're playing chess with human emotions, they're not stronger than you. They're often just detached, disconnected. They've learned to amputate the parts of themselves that feel too much because feeling too much meant getting hurt too much. They've built walls so high that nothing gets in, but nothing gets out either. They're living in a fortress, and fortresses are prisons dressed up as protection. You, on the other hand, you're exposed. You're raw. Every nerve ending is live wire. And yes, that means you get hurt easier. But it also means you love deeper. You understand faster. You see through the bullshit quicker. Because you're not just hearing their words, you're feeling the intention behind them. The subtext. The hidden blade wrapped in casual conversation. Your tears are your body's way of saying, I see what you're really doing, and it cuts deeper than you know. But let me tell you what else is happening when you cry during an argument. Control is shifting, and the person across from you knows it. That's why they react the way they do. Some people will soften, realizing they've gone too far. Those are the ones with a shred of humanity left. But others, the dangerous ones, they'll double down. They'll mock you, gaslight you, tell you you're being dramatic, oversensitive, manipulative. They'll weaponize your tears because they know, consciously or not, that your tears expose their cruelty. Your breakdown is a mirror, and they hate what they see in it. So they'll try to make you the villain of your own emotional honesty. They'll rewrite the narrative so that your pain becomes the problem, not their actions. This is psychological warfare, and you've been losing because you've been playing by their rules. Here's what you need to understand about the psychology of people who cry easily during arguments. You're what's called a highly sensitive person, or you have heightened emotional permeability. That's not a disorder. That's not a flaw. That's a different operating system. About 15 to 20% of the population is wired this way. You process sensory information more deeply. You're more aware of subtleties in your environment, in tone, in facial expressions. You pick up on microaggressions that others miss entirely. You're essentially walking through the world with all your senses turned up to maximum volume, while everyone else is on medium. And when you're in an argument, that sensitivity doesn't turn off. It amplifies. Every word lands heavier. Every dismissive gesture cuts sharper. Your brain is making connections at lightning speed, pulling up past experiences, patterns, fears, hopes, and synthesizing it all in real time. No wonder your body short circuits into tears. You're doing the emotional labor of 3 people simultaneously. But here's where the darkness creeps in. Here's where we separate the aware from the oblivious. Your tears, whether you know it or not, have become a weapon in someone else's hands. Maybe not intentionally at first, but over time, people learn what breaks you. They learn that raising their voice a certain way will make your eyes water. They learn that a specific phrase will crack your composure. And some people, the truly twisted ones, they'll use that knowledge. They'll manufacture arguments just to watch you crumble. Because your breakdown gives them power, it makes them feel in control. It makes them feel superior. You're giving them your breaking point, gift wrapped, over and over again. And they're exploiting it. Not because they're stronger, because they're emptier. because making you cry fills a void in them that nothing else can touch. They're emotional vampires, and your tears are the blood they feed on. Now, you might be thinking, how do I stop crying? How do I become one of those people who can argue without falling apart? Wrong question. Dead end. That's still playing their game. That's still accepting the premise that your tears are the problem. The real question is this: how do I weaponize what I thought was my weakness? How do I turn this sensitivity into a scalpel instead of a scar? Because here's the secret they don't want you to know. Your ability to feel this deeply is the most dangerous tool you possess if you learn to channel it. Those tears you shed, they're data, they're feedback. They're your body telling you exactly who to trust and who to cut out of your life. They're a detector for toxicity that most people don't have. You cry around certain people because those people are poison. Your tears aren't random. They're precise. They're your soul rejecting what your mind is trying to rationalize. Think about it. You don't cry during every argument. You cry during the ones that matter. The ones where you're invested. The ones where you actually give a damn about the other person's opinion of you. That's information. That's leverage. If you can step back and observe who triggers those tears and why, you've just gained tactical advantage. You know who has access to your core. You know who's been given the keys to your emotional kingdom. And once you know that, you can start deciding who deserves to keep those keys and who needs to have them revoked permanently. This isn't about becoming cold. This is about becoming selective, strategic, surgical with your vulnerability. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two people in an argument. One is screaming, veins bulging, fists clenched, trying to dominate through volume and intimidation. The other is crying, shaking, barely able to get words out. Who looks weaker? Society says the one crying. But look closer. Who's actually lost control? The one screaming. They've abandoned reason. They've resorted to primal dominance displays because they have nothing else. The one crying, they're still there, still present, still trying to communicate through the storm. Their body is betraying them, but their intent is pure. They haven't given up. They haven't walked away. They're fighting with every tool they have, even if those tools feel insufficient. That's not weakness. That's persistence under impossible conditions. That's courage wearing the mask of fragility. And here's the part that will haunt you. The part you'll think about at 3 in the morning, when you're replaying every argument you've ever lost. Most of the people who made you cry don't remember it the way you do. To them, it was Tuesday, another argument, another win. They moved on before you even dried your eyes. But you're still carrying it, still analyzing what you could have said differently, still hating yourself for crying, still believing you failed. Every symmetry of pain is the real cruelty. You're suffering in high definition while they've already changed the channel. And the sickest part, you probably apologized. You probably said sorry for crying, for making them uncomfortable, for being too much. You weaponized your pain against yourself and handed them the ammunition. Stop doing that. Stop apologizing for having a central nervous system that actually works. You want to know why you cry so easily during arguments. Because you were taught that your emotions are a burden, that your sensitivity is an inconvenience, that the way you experience the world is somehow wrong. Maybe it was a parent who told you to toughen up. Maybe it was a partner who mocked your tears. Maybe it was a culture that celebrates stoicism and punishes vulnerability. Somewhere along the line, you internalize the message that feeling deeply is a defect. So now, when you're in conflict, you're not just fighting the person in front of you. You're fighting every voice that ever told you that you're too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too broken. Your tears aren't just about the argument. They're about every time you were made to feel ashamed for being exactly who you are. That's why they come so fast. That's why they won't stop. You're not crying about the dishes, or the text message, or the tone they used. You're crying about a lifetime of being told your wiring is faulty. So, what do you do with that knowledge? You start by understanding that the people who remain calm during arguments aren't necessarily the winners. They're just better at compartmentalizing, better at dissociating, better at pretending that words don't land, and maybe that works for them. Maybe they sleep fine at night, but you were never meant to compartmentalize. You were built to integrate, to process, to transform pain into wisdom, instead of burying it in some psychological landfill where it festers and rots. Your tears are part of that transformation. They're the physical manifestation of your brain reorganizing itself around new information. When you cry during an argument, you're not breaking down. You're breaking through. You're shedding an old version of yourself that believed you had to accept mistreatment. That's metamorphosis, and metamorphosis is violent. It's supposed to hurt. Let's dig into the psychology of the people on the other side of your tears. The ones who stay composed, the ones who never crack. What are they really doing? They're performing. They've learned that emotional control is a form of social currency, that the person who cares less wins. That detachment is power. So they've trained themselves to disconnect from their feelings in real time. They've mastered the art of the poker face. But here's what you need to understand about that strategy. It's unsustainable. Those emotions don't disappear. They don't evaporate just because someone refuses to acknowledge them. They go underground. They calcify into resentment, bitterness, chronic anxiety, physical illness. Those calm, collected people you envy, half of them are on medications to manage the shit they've been suppressing for decades. The other half are time bombs waiting for the right trigger to detonate their entire life. You cry now, they'll implode later. Who's really winning? But there's another type, the ones who don't cry because they genuinely don't care. These are the people you need to watch out for. The narcissists, the sociopaths, the emotionally bankrupt humans who figured out that arguments are just games, and the person who cares less has all the leverage. They don't cry because there's nothing inside them deep enough to produce tears. They're running on autopilot, on scripts, on manipulation tactics they've perfected over years of using people. When you cry in front of them, they're not seeing your humanity. They're seeing confirmation of their power. They're seeing proof that they can still affect you, and that feeds something dark in them, something hungry. These people will engineer arguments specifically to make you cry, because your breakdown is their high. It's the only thing that makes them feel alive. Recognize them. Not everyone who stays calm is strong. Some of them are just empty. Now here's where we flip the script entirely. What if your tears aren't the weakness you think they are? What if they're actually the most honest thing in the room? Think about it. In a world built on performance, on filters, on carefully curated personas, your tears are raw truth. They're the one thing you can't fake. You can't manufacture real tears on command unless you're a trained actor. And even then, it's difficult. Your tears are authentication. They're proof that what's happening matters to you, that you're invested, that you're real. In a sea of artificial humans playing artificial games, you're bleeding real blood. That's not a bug, that's a feature. The question is whether you're going to keep letting people use your authenticity against you, or whether you're going to start seeing it as the rare commodity it actually is. Here's a psychological principle most people don't know about. It's called the paradox of vulnerability. The more you try to hide your weaknesses, the more power they have over you. The more you expose them, own them, integrate them, the less ammunition anyone has. Your tears embarrass you because you see them as a secret that got exposed. But what happens when they're not a secret anymore? What happens when you stop apologizing for them? When you stop trying to blink them away, or hide your face, or change the subject? What happens when you let them fall and keep talking? You disarm everyone who was trying to use them against you, because now your tears aren't a gotcha moment. They're just part of the landscape. They're just part of how you communicate. And suddenly, the people who were weaponizing them don't know what to do. You've taken away their power by refusing to be ashamed. But let's be brutally honest about something else. Sometimes you cry because you know you're wrong and you can't admit it. Sometimes those tears are a defense mechanism, a way to shift the focus from the validity of the argument to your emotional state. Sometimes you cry to avoid accountability, to make the other person feel like the bad guy for pressing a point that needed to be pressed. This is manipulation, whether you're conscious of it or not. And if you're doing this, you need to stop, because now you're not the victim of your sensitivity. You're the perpetrator, using it as a shield. There's a difference between crying because you're overwhelmed and crying because you're cornered. Learn to recognize which one you're doing. Be honest with yourself about whether your tears are genuine overflow or strategic deflection. Because if it's the latter, you're becoming the very thing you hate. You're using emotion as a weapon, and that makes you no different from the people who hurt you. Let's talk about what happens to your relationships when you cry easily during arguments. Some people will leave. They'll decide you're too much work, too exhausting, too high maintenance. Let them go. They were never equipped to handle the depth you operate at anyway. They wanted someone surface level, someone easy, someone who doesn't require them to grow or confront their own emotional inadequacies. You're not that person. You never will be. And pretending to be costs you everything. The people who stay, the ones who don't run when you cry, those are your people. But even they will need boundaries. Because here's the trap. If you cry during every argument, your tears lose their meaning. They become white noise. They become the boy who cried wolf. People stop taking them seriously. They stop seeing them as significant. They start rolling their eyes instead of softening their tone. You've trained them to dismiss your emotions by flooding them with emotions constantly. So you need to learn discernment. Not every disagreement is worth tears. Not every conflict is worth the full intensity of your emotional response. Save it for the battles that matter, for the moments when something fundamental is at stake. Otherwise, you're diluting your own power. Here's a dark truth about human nature. People respect what costs them something. If your tears come cheap, they're worthless. But if your tears are rare, if they only appear when something truly devastating has occurred, they become currency. They become a signal that cannot be ignored. Think of it like this. If you scream every day, no one hears you when there's real danger. But if you're silent for months, and then you scream, everyone stops. Everyone listens. Your tears need to be the same. They need to mean something, and that means you need to develop emotional regulation, not suppression. Regulation. The ability to feel everything, but choose what you express and when. This is where your real power lies, in the gap between feeling and expression. In the choice. Most people who cry easily during arguments have one thing in common. They have poor boundaries. They let people get too close too fast. They give away their inner world to anyone who shows a passing interest. They're so hungry for connection, for understanding, for validation, that they'll open up to people who haven't earned access. And then they're shocked when those people use their vulnerability against them. Listen carefully. Not everyone deserves to know you. Not everyone deserves to see you cry. Your tears are sacred. They're a glimpse into your soul. And you've been handing them out like free samples at a grocery store. Stop. Start vetting people. Start making them prove they can handle your depth before you show it to them. Watch how they treat others. Watch how they talk about their exes. Watch how they respond when you set a small boundary. These are tests, and most people will fail them. That's fine. That's the point. You're looking for the rare ones, the ones who can hold space for your intensity without trying to fix it, mock it, or exploit it. And here's something nobody tells you. Your crying during arguments might be a trauma response. If you grew up in a household where conflict meant danger, where raised voices preceded violence, where emotional expression was punished, your nervous system learned to associate arguments with survival threats. So now, even in safe disagreements with safe people, your body responds like it's in mortal danger. Your tears are your body's way of trying to de-escalate a threat that isn't actually there. This is complex PTSD. This is your childhood writing checks your adult life has to cash. And until you address that, until you do the work to reprogram your nervous system, you're going to keep crying during arguments, even when you don't want to. This isn't weakness. This is wiring, and wiring can be changed. But it takes time, therapy, and a willingness to revisit some dark places. But let's say you've done the work. You've healed the trauma. You've set the boundaries. You've learned to regulate, and you still cry during arguments. Good, that means you're still human. That means the world hasn't hardened you into something unrecognizable. There's a certain point where you need to accept that this is just who you are, that your tears are part of your design. And instead of fighting against your nature, you start working with it. You start choosing partners who see your tears as honesty, not manipulation. You start building a life where emotional expression is valued, not punished. You stop trying to fit into spaces that require you to be someone you're not. This is the shift from seeing your tears as a problem to be solved, to seeing them as information about who belongs in your life and who doesn't. Now we get into the execution, the practical application of everything we've just dismantled. Because understanding why you cry is worthless if you don't know what to do with that understanding. So let's build you a framework, a system, a way of operating in conflict that doesn't require you to stop being who you are, but allows you to use who you are as an advantage instead of a liability. First thing you need to accept right now is that you will cry again. Probably soon. Probably in the next argument that touches something real inside you. And that's fine. The goal isn't to stop crying. The goal is to stop letting your tears dictate the outcome of the conflict, to stop letting them be the thing that derails the entire conversation. to stop handing control to the other person the moment the first tear falls. Here's your first tactical move. When you feel the tears coming, and you will feel them before they arrive, there's that tightness in your throat, that heat behind your eyes, that wobble in your voice, you name it. Out loud, you say, "I'm about to cry," and it doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean you've won. It doesn't mean this conversation is over. It means I care about this more than I can articulate right now. And my body is responding to that intensity. Keep talking. You've just done something most people who cry during arguments never do. You've maintained narrative control. You've refused to let the tears become the main event. You've contextualized them before the other person can weaponize them. And more importantly, you've kept the argument moving forward, instead of letting it stall out in your emotional response. This is mastery. This is using your self-awareness as a shield. Second move. Learn to cry and argue simultaneously. This sounds impossible until you practice it. Most people stop talking when they start crying. They choke up. They cover their face. They leave the room. They've accepted the narrative that crying means forfeiting the conversation. Reject that. Let the tears fall and keep making your point. Let your voice crack and keep speaking your truth. It will be uncomfortable. It will feel vulnerable in a way that's almost unbearable. But discomfort is not danger. And what you're doing is retraining everyone around you to understand that your tears don't mean submission. They mean you're operating at full capacity. You're firing on all cylinders, emotion and logic at the same time. Most people can't handle that frequency, but the ones who matter will learn to. Third move, and this is where it gets darker. Start documenting who makes you cry and why. Keep a record. Mental or physical, doesn't matter. But pay attention to patterns. Does this person always make you cry when you try to set a boundary? Do the tears always come when you're asking for something you need? Is there a specific topic that always ends with you sobbing and them feeling justified? These patterns are data. They're telling you something crucial about the nature of that relationship. If someone consistently reduces you to tears and never adjusts their behavior, never softens their approach, never takes accountability for how they engage with you, that's not a relationship. That's a hostage situation, and you keep showing up to negotiate your own ransom. Stop. Some people make you cry because the relationship itself is toxic, because they're fundamentally incompatible with your nervous system. And no amount of communication will fix that. You need to start seeing your tears as an exit sign, not a failure. Fourth move. Develop a post-argument protocol, because here's what usually happens. You cry during the argument. Maybe it ends. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, you're left in the aftermath, flooded with shame, replaying everything you said and didn't say, hating yourself for crying, wondering if you're broken. This is where most people who cry easily do the most damage to themselves. In the aftermath, so you need a system. As soon as the argument is over, you give yourself exactly 10 minutes to feel everything. Set a timer if you need to. Cry harder if you want. Scream into a pillow. Write out every vicious thought. But when that timer goes off, you're done with the shame spiral. Now you switch to analysis. What was the argument actually about? What need of yours wasn't being met? What boundary was crossed? What did your tears tell you about what matters to you? You're not asking what you did wrong. You're asking what you learned. This shift from shame to curiosity is everything. It's the difference between staying trapped in the cycle and evolving past it. Fifth move, and this one will save your life. Start arguing with people who don't make you cry. Practice conflict with safe people, friends who love you, therapists, support groups, people who have earned the right to see you vulnerable and won't exploit it. Argue about small things. Disagree about movies or restaurants or philosophical concepts. Get comfortable with the sensation of conflict without the terror. Because right now, arguments are traumatic for you. Your body goes into full crisis mode at the first sign of disagreement. But if you can recondition your nervous system to understand that conflict doesn't always equal danger, that disagreement doesn't always equal abandonment, you can start to separate the physical response from the actual threat level. This is exposure therapy, and it works. Slowly, painfully, but it works. Sixth move, learn to identify the people who are addicted to your tears, the ones who push and push and push until you break, and then they get this look on their face. Relief, satisfaction, power. These people are emotional sadists, whether they admit it or not. They might even feel guilty about it afterward. They might apologize, promise to do better. But then the next argument comes, and they do the exact same thing. Because they're not arguing to resolve anything. They're arguing to see you cry, to feel in control, to fill whatever emptiness is eating them alive from the inside. You cannot fix these people. You cannot love them enough to make them stop. You can only remove yourself from their feeding ground. And the sooner you do, the sooner you stop hating yourself for being the person they feast on. Now let's talk about the people who dismiss your tears by calling them manipulation. Who say you're crying to get your way, to avoid accountability, to play the victim. Sometimes they're right. We covered that. But sometimes they're just revealing their own emotional incompetence. They're telling you that they've never experienced emotion intense enough to produce involuntary physical responses. Or worse, they have, and they've suppressed it so thoroughly that seeing you cry triggers their own shame about their buried feelings. So they attack you for having what they've amputated from themselves. When someone accuses you of manipulative crying, you look them dead in the eye and you say this: If I were manipulating you, I'd be better at it. I wouldn't be this goddamn miserable. And then you continue the conversation, because their accusation is a deflection, an attempt to make your emotional state the problem, instead of addressing the actual issue. Don't take the bait. Here's a brutal truth you need to internalize. Some arguments aren't meant to be won. They're meant to reveal. They're meant to show you who someone really is. When the mask slips, when you cry during these arguments, and the other person responds with cruelty, with mockery, with dismissal, they're showing you their capacity for empathy, which is zero. That's valuable information. You just paid for it with your tears, but it's worth every drop. If you actually listen to what they're telling you, people tell you who they are and how they treat you when you're crying. Some will soften. Some will hold you. Some will apologize for their part in your pain. Others will escalate, mock you, record you, post about you, weaponize your vulnerability for social currency. These responses aren't random. They're diagnostic. They're showing you the content of someone's character. Believe what you see. Let me give you a framework for understanding the different types of people you'll encounter when you cry during arguments. First, there's the fixer. They immediately try to stop your tears, offer solutions, tell you it's okay. These people mean well, but they're often uncomfortable with emotion and want to fast forward through your pain to get back to comfortable ground. They're not bad, just limited. Second, there's the mirror. They see your tears and they tear up too. They feel your pain so intensely, they can't separate it from their own. These are your empaths, your highly sensitive kindred. They're safe, but they can't always give you what you need because they're drowning in the feeling too. Third, there's the witness. They see your tears and they just stay. They don't try to fix. Don't try to stop you. Don't make it about them. They just hold space. These are the rarest. These are the ones you build your life around. Fourth, there's the analyzer. They see your tears and start interrogating the logic of your argument, completely bypassing the emotion to focus on facts. These people are often high, functioning, and conflict avoidant. They're not trying to hurt you. They genuinely don't know how to engage with emotion. You can work with these people if you learn to translate your feelings into language they understand. Fifth, there's the predator. They see your tears and they smile, internally or externally. They've found your weak spot and they're going to exploit it forever. These are the ones you run from: the narcissists, the sociopaths, the energy vampires who feed on your pain. And sixth, there's the ghost. They see your tears and they leave, physically or emotionally. They shut down, dissociate, check out. These are the avoidantly attached, the ones who learn that emotion equals danger, and the only way to survive is to disappear. You can't reach these people when they're in that state. You can only decide if you want to keep trying or if you deserve someone who can stay present. Now, here's your ultimate power move. The thing that will change everything if you can master it. You learn to use your tears as a filter, as a sorting mechanism. You stop trying to hide them or control them or apologize for them. You let them be exactly what they are, a natural response to intensity. And you watch how people respond, because their response tells you everything you need to know about whether they belong in your inner circle or not. Your tears become a test, not a conscious manipulation. Just an honest reaction that reveals the truth about who's in the room with you. The people who can handle your tears without making them about themselves, without weaponizing them, without running from them. Those are your people. Everyone else is a tourist, and you stop giving tourists access to your sacred spaces. Here's what happens when you stop fighting your tears and start accepting them as part of your operating system. You stop wasting energy trying to be someone you're not. You stop entering relationships and friendships and professional spaces that require you to amputate parts of yourself to fit in. You start gravitating toward environments where emotional honesty is valued, where depth is respected, where sensitivity is seen as the superpower it actually is. And slowly, the quality of your life transforms. Not because you changed who you are, because you stopped betraying who you are to make other people comfortable. Your tears were never the problem. Your willingness to dim yourself for people who couldn't handle your light, that was the problem. Let me tell you what's on the other side of this shift. Freedom. Not the freedom from crying, the freedom to cry without it destroying you. The freedom to have your emotional response and still maintain your dignity, your power, your sense of self. You stop seeing your tears as evidence of weakness and start seeing them as evidence of aliveness, as proof that you're still connected to your humanity in a world that's constantly trying to turn you into a machine. And that's rare. That's valuable. That's the thing that will save you when everyone around you is drowning in their own emotional constipation and wondering why they feel so empty. So here's your final assignment. The next time you cry during an argument, I want you to do something different. I want you to stop mid-cry and ask yourself this question. What am I really crying about? Not the surface issue, the deep one, the wound underneath the wound, the fear, the unmet need, the pattern you're finally seeing clearly. Because your tears are trying to tell you something, and you keep ignoring the message because you're too busy being ashamed of the messenger. Your tears are not your enemy. They're your most loyal ally. They're the part of you that refuses to lie, that refuses to pretend, that refuses to accept mistreatment just to keep the peace. And here's the truth they don't want you to know. The world needs more people who cry during arguments. More people who care enough to let their pain show More people who refuse to play the game of emotional chess, where whoever feels less wins. Because that game is killing us. It's creating a society of disconnected, defended, emotionally bankrupt humans who mistake numbness for strength. You're not like them. You never will be. And that's not a curse. That's a calling. To be the one who stays soft in a hard world. To be the one who feels everything and survives anyway. To be the one who cries and keeps fighting. So join the few who understand. The ones who know that tears aren't surrender. They're strategy. They're reconnaissance. They're your body's way of telling you what matters and who deserves access to what matters. Subscribe if you're ready to stop apologizing for your depth. If you're ready to weaponize what they told you was weakness. If you're ready to walk through this world as exactly who you are, tears and all, and let that honesty burn away everyone and everything that can't handle the heat. Because you're not here to be easy. You're here to be real. And real is rare. Real is dangerous. Real is the only thing worth being. The people who made you cry during arguments, they're going to keep living their small lives. They're going to keep having surface level conversations with surface level people. Never going deeper than what's comfortable. Never risking real connection, because real connection requires the exact vulnerability they mocked you for having. And one day, maybe years from now, they're going to be sitting alone in the dark, wondering why everything feels hollow, why success doesn't taste like they thought it would, why they can't shake this gnawing emptiness that follows them everywhere. And in that moment, they'll remember you. They'll remember the person who cried, who felt, who cared so much it spilled out in tears, and they'll realize what they lost. Not you as a person, but the mirror you held up, the invitation you extended to feel something real. But by then, you'll be long gone, surrounded by people who earned the privilege of your tears, living a life so rich in authentic connection that you barely remember the version of yourself who apologized for being human. That's the revenge, not becoming cold like them, but staying warm and building something beautiful that they'll never have access to because they chose comfort over truth.